Some things go up, some things go down. The latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. Acast released its financial report for Q3 22. Revenue was $29.8 million, up 21% year-on-year, or up 1.9% quarter-on-quarter. It made a loss, though, in the quarter of $6 million, though improved its profit margin. Audacy published its financial report for Q3 22. Digital, including podcasting, made $62 million in the quarter, up just 2% year-on-year, down 10% quarter-on-quarter. Total revenues declined 3.8% year-on-year. The company's threatened with stock market delisting, and stock hit a record low of 27 cents yesterday. Audacy's problems may help inform where podcasting goes next. Sounds Profitable with Red Circle this week looks at radio's warnings for the podcast industry. In part 2 of his essay, Tom Webster warns us to do more research, respect your audience, focus on under 30s, and don't forget a bad dancer by the side of the road. Growth-orientated podcast hosting platform Captivate has just announced a significant increase in its tiered download limits, all of which have been at least doubled. Customers get their new permanent limits applied today. Podtrac released its US podcast rankers for October. iHeart Podcast remains number 1 podcast publisher. Wondery remains number 1 podcast sales network. The Daily remains number 1 podcast by total audience. And the ranker remains incomplete, measuring participating publishers only. Veritone published its financial report for Q3 22. It made a loss of $5.7 million. WTHR reports on AudioChuck, the podcast producer owned by Ashley Flowers. The company based in Indianapolis now has over 30 employees. The podcast host is running the IndiePod Census, which they call the first international exercise focusing exclusively on independent podcasters and their needs. You've got until December the 9th to fill it in. The results will be unveiled in an online summit on January the 26th. And we've a link to take part in our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. And Team Coco, the Conan O'Brien-led podcast network, is to launch a comedy channel on satellite radio service SiriusXM. In podcast news, these are the stories. The Law & Order podcast gets a write-up from the Concord Monitor. They'll be doing a live stage show this Friday at the Bank of NH stage in Concord. Wondering what your new business owners are going to do with your company? Twitter employees were told to listen in to the All In podcast, according to reports, a 90-minute show with 6 interesting quotes, according to Business Insider. Blimey. Both Jason Calacanis and David Sachs, who star on the podcast, are working at Twitter now. Legendary with Kevin Jonas Sr. is new from Storic Media. If you think Kevin Jonas Sr. might have something to do with the Jonas Brothers, you'd be right. He's the patriarch of the family and has been in entertainment for decades. In the new show, he talks with entertainment icons about legendary moments and the stories behind them. And it's not only football. Friday Night Lights and Beyond is new from Podcast One, with original Friday Night Lights cast member Zach Gilford, Scott Porter, and self-proclaimed Friday Night Lights superfan Mae Whitman. It is very difficult to say Friday Night Lights, and it'll debut tomorrow. And that's the latest from our daily newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.